Welcome to the Loadout Music Podcast, featuring intimate conversations with emerging and established musicians. Recorded at the Gaslight Studios in St. Louis. And now your host, Aaron Perlett. Welcome back to the Loadout Music Podcast. I am Aaron Perlett, and we are, of course, presented by our good friends at Shinesty and Wellbeing Brewing. Today I am joined by Reverend Peyton of Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band. Reverend Peyton, what's up today?
Man, it's a beautiful day. Things are looking up. I am very, very happy to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
Hey man, it's great to meet you. I've been absorbing a lot of your music lately, and I'm excited just to kind of hear about your story because you've had some interesting ups and downs. While I'm not a reverend, I believe you and I do share at least one thing in common outside of a really good-looking beard, and that is we're both Kentucky Colonels. That's right. We are both Kentucky Colonels, which makes us better than most, I believe. So
it's like being knighted in Kentucky.
It is like being who doesn't want to be knighted in Kentucky? Now, I will say this: you were homecoming king at your high school in Westfield High School in Indiana, and now, for sure, that was not my path. I mean, I was a terrible football player and a terrible human being, still am. And yeah,
I never lettered.
Yeah,
I never played a sport. I got all of that just on pure charm alone.
Pure charm. That's why I never got homecoming king, because I have zero charm whatsoever. So, tell me about you. I know, so you grew up in Indiana, and your father introduced you to music, right? Is that really kind of your gateway into music?
Yeah, I mean, music is in America is a big deal. People don't realize that. They take it for granted. You know what I mean? Like I've had the luxury of playing music in 38 different countries across 4 continents. I can tell you that other countries, it's not the same. We grow up in this country. You're singing songs in school. For those that went to church, you're singing songs in church. The first thing you probably hear when you're a baby in this country is your mom singing to you at night, and that literally could be the first thing you hear. So at our house, music was a big deal, but not necessarily like performing music. That didn't come until I was like 12 years old. My dad says, we're going to go get a guitar later today. And I said, and this, I guess, shows what a smart ass thing. I mean, you can't outsmart ass my dad. So he just took it with stride. I said, you don't know how to play and you can't afford a guitar. And he said, I can, and I can. And so we went to this shop and bought the cheapest guitar they had there, which was a K, a really cheap, horrendous K, electric guitar with no amp.
Yeah.
So we came home, and I'm sitting next to him, and he's banging away on all these chords, and he knows all these songs, like little blues runs, old songs from like the 60s and stuff, and like just all kinds of stuff, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it, And apparently he had a guitar and had to sell it when I was born. He had a couple of guitars, I guess, and had to sell them. When I was born, got hard up for money and needed the money. So he wasn't like a pro by no means, but he was a lover of music. And, seeing him play those songs, those things, it just fired me up. And he said, well, if you get good, we'll get an amp. So I just started playing the thing nonstop, and and basically it's the same way. I haven't stopped playing it. In 2 months, I think we got a little tiny Gorilla amp. Anyone that plays guitar knows that's the worst amplifier ever made. So I had a K with a Gorilla amp, probably the cheapest, most horrendous setup you could ever have. But I played the thing. I wore it out. By the time I was 13, I was giving guitar lessons.
That's amazing. And But then, not long after your high school graduation, you started suffering pretty excruciating pain in your hands, right? And particularly in your left hand.
Yeah, I don't know if you can
which you
see
fret
this
with.
over the Zoom, but you can still see. Yeah, you can. You can still
The
see
scar
the
there,
scar
yeah.
right there. So I started having pain and problems, and I've since found out like a lot since I actually had my surgery. But for a year and a half, I couldn't really play. It was just it wasn't just pain; everything was locked up, and I believe I don't know if you can see this over this here, but see my thumb?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I can do things with my hands that shouldn't be able to be done.
Yeah,
and that hyperflexibility comes at a cost.
Yeah,
is what I have learned over time, and I'm very prone to those tendons rupturing, and then little ganglion cysts grow on them, and those ganglion cysts can be they're always painful, usually when with the right pressed on the right angle or whatever. But sometimes they're actually like they lock your hands up. So I've kind of learned how to deal with them over the years. Where knock on wood, I haven't had to have any surgery. I've been able to deal with them myself through just basically sheer will, strength training, active release therapy, stuff like that. But it's kind of like, one of the reasons why my hands are so flexible and strange is also the reason why I believe that happened to me when I was 18. And it was really hard because I had to let all my students go. At the time I had all these guitar students, and I was playing in a handful of different bands, but also my own band. It was kind of, I had a crazy high school experience where we would always have tons of people come out to our shows. We'd have hundreds of people at our concerts when I was in high school playing blues music. It was just really weird. I don't know how that we managed to make that happen, but so I had always planned on playing guitar professionally one way or another. Like that was my, and since I was 12, that's like, I was like, that's what I'm going to do,
Yeah.
And then at 18, it's like, nope, sorry, kid. I had a doctor say, hey, you need to find something else to do with your life. Like this ain't ever going to be better.
Yeah. But I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but so you ultimately went to something called the Indiana Hand Center, and they were able to kind of take some of that scar tissue off.
Yeah. So what he said was, I went there. I finally went to the Indiana Hand Center. I went to all these, different things, and nothing worked, and he said, look, I think I know exactly what's wrong with you, but the only way to really get in there and fix it is to cut your hand open. And if I get in there and I see a bunch of cysts, and like he said, they're going to be tiny, almost microscopic, but they get in between. Your tendons have like, it's almost like there is a sheath around a tube. Mm-hmm. So it's, so inside that they can grow in there. And he said, if there's scar tissue and cysts in there, I'm going to cut them away. And what gave it away is every now and then I get them, they grow huge. And I have one in my right hand that grew really large, and they operate on that one at the same time. And he said, I think the same thing's going on the other hand, but on a more microscopic level, which is actually can be more painful when it's inside that sheath there. So he said, what I'm going to do is the only way to know for sure is to cut your hands open. He said, I'm going to cut your hands open, and I'm going to cut that stuff away. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to remove half your tendon. But if I'm right, I'll cut that stuff away, and you'll be playing guitar again in 2 weeks. So he was right. And I was playing guitar again in 2 weeks. Now, it wasn't like you don't go from a year and a half being laid off something to just completely back to it. But in that time, a lot had happened to me, and it just flipped a switch in my brain that it actually made me a much better player, and it really turned on that whatever part of my brain allows me to do the finger style guitar stuff that I'm known for. It like that's less a dexterity thing and way more a mental thing, and that it flipped that switch. I had to go through it, whatever that was. I had to go through it, and because otherwise I definitely wouldn't be the player that I am. I can tell you that right now.
And then it was in that recovery period that you met Breezy, who is kind of a pivotal part of your brand. And also, I believe she's referred to as the Miss Elizabeth of country blues. Is that right?
Yeah, someone called her that.
Oh, yeah, Miss Elizabeth.
Yeah. And
Freak
she
out.
loves it. She loves hearing that. But
gotta love Macho Man to understand that one. But still,
Breezy was a little girl that loved all that era of pro wrestling, so she loves that. Her dad would take her to all those matches, man. Go see, Macho Man and Jake the Snake and Miss Elizabeth, and all that stuff.
I grew up on those guys, so yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, she was all about it, and she was little tiny. Like, she's got this story about when she was like, I don't know, like 6 years old, and just her dad would take her to the airport after the matches, when they go through, and then they would hang out and wait for all the wrestlers to come through the airport and chat them up. That was one of their tricks, And one time they were at like, I don't know, WrestleMania or something when it came to Indiana, and Cyndi Lauper, her dad like sent her to go get a hot dog by herself or something, and she's like 6 years old, and she got lost and started crying, and Cyndi Lauper helped her back to her seat.
Girls just want to have fun, man. That's
so
it.
She's definitely the Miss Elizabeth of country blues, no doubt.
Yeah. So, you guys start.
So you're at the timeline. So yeah, so this is how the timeline when Breezy and I met. No joke. So I'm 2 weeks in these bandages, right? I'm supposed to have stitches on my hands for 2 weeks. They get taken out in 2 weeks, and I'm supposed to start physical therapy and attempting to play the guitar again and do normal stuff. 1 week after my surgery is when I met Breezy. I was still in my bandages. But
then you start kind of building that foundation for what your band is today. I know Breezy took up the Washboard. You guys started writing songs together, and ultimately you start opening for some bigger acts. People like Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi, playing at festivals, and start to build what you've got today with Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band, right?
Yeah, so when I had my hand surgery, I was 19 years old, and that's when I met Breezy. So we were very young. And, it took a minute to get to where, like I had to basically relearn how to not just play guitar, but have the confidence to be in front of people again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was very hard for me then. That was one of the things I think Breezy helped me through the most, was just, that I was good enough to play in front of people. I had to kind of get that together. And so there was we started doing this, that, and the other, but it was a while before we were like really, up and running like a real professional band. We started playing together. Breezy helped me with my confidence and get myself back together. And I basically got her playing music. She has a very innate natural rhythm that is it's one of those things, man. It is hard to describe, and until I get her around other people that know. We did this session with Steve the Colonel Cropper.
We interviewed Steve Cropper on this show to begin this season. He's an amazing guy.
Excellent, man. One of the most important musicians in American history.
No doubt about it.
People don't necessarily know there's in American music, there's a lot of people behind the people. And, pretty much what we know of as R&B guitar was invented by Steve Cropper, right?
He wrote two of the most famous songs in music history, On the Dock of the Bay and In the Midnight Hour. He's remarkable. And he played
with them all. Like he was the guitar on every Stax artist. I mean,
everyone.
So much that of as American R&B guitar, it's him. He was the one that did it. So he's played with them all. He's played with everybody.
Yep.
And then and after Stax, he went on and played with everybody. And we did this session with him where we recorded a version of "Shake Your Moneymaker." I don't know if you got a chance to hear that or not. We released it kind of in the middle of the pandemic. We recorded it in 2019 December, right before everything went shut down, really. And then released it in the middle of the pandemic. But after the session, you know, I'm hanging with Steve, and he's telling us all these cool stories, and just a great guy. And it was an amazing thing. We're recording at Sun Studios with Steve Cropper, and Dom Flemings was there with us, you know, too. But it's just an incredible thing, right? And Steve afterwards, he comes up and he like says, "Hey, come over here." So I'm like thinking, what's Steve gonna say, man? It's like his parting words to me, you know. This is gonna be incredible. I just can't wait. And he said, "Hey, she's the best washboard player I've ever played with, and one of the best percussionists I've ever heard. Her feel is incredible." And I'm like, "Oh, I know." And he's like, "No, you don't understand. Like, no, her feel is incredible." And I want to be like, "Well, you know, what about my slide guitar there? What do you think about that?"
What about me? This is about me, man.
Yeah, but and during the session, he actually stopped. Like, he goes, "Hey, look, everybody stop. Everyone needs to be playing this like she's playing it." And he actually said, in one of the takes, he actually stopped and said that. Everyone needs to be playing this like she's playing it. But Breezy's feel is incredible, and I take credit for all of it, but I really can't. It's she has a natural ability, and she's, you know, been there with me every step of the way, you know, playing for now. Breezy and I have been together 21 years. So we've been doing this a long time together, and we've been doing it 15 years, like professionally, like full time, nothing but this. This is our 15th year that we've been doing it. So, you know, we basically, when we started, we were teenagers. You know, sometimes I think, you know, people, they look back and then it's like, well, I was a teenager when we got together and when we first started playing music together. You know, we were very young. So someone said to me yesterday, said, "Man, it feels like you've been around forever." And I said, "Well, it's because we've been doing this since we were kids." You know, like that. We really were. I've always looked way older than I was. You know, I think now I'm starting to come around where I'm starting to maybe look my age, or even a little bit younger. Because I when I was 19, this is a crazy story, but I'm 19 years old. It's Breezy and I's first date. All right, our first date, and we go to the state fair. And you know those people that guess your weight and age? Well, we went to one of those people to guess weight and age, right? And they're professionals. This is what they do all day long, right? They go around, they hustle people because they're really good at guessing weight and age. And they've got a window they can guess where, you know, if you're in that window, they still win, right? That's kind of part of their trick. So I'm 19 years old. This guy guessed I was 42. and I was like, "No, man, I'm 19. And he thought I was lying. I had to get out several forms of ID. He thought he was being hustled himself. And I ended up, winning the biggest prize because he was so off, you know, and he was in trouble with whoever's like his manager. It was a big deal. And so I won this giant bear, which we called the Big Damn Bear.
Well, that's where the name for your band ultimately came from, right?
Where our band came from.
Yeah. All right, we're talking to the Reverend Peyton of the Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band. We'll be right back after these words from one of our valued sponsors. Hey, this is Aaron Perlett, and for those who have been listening, know that Well-Being Brewing is pretty much my favorite drink in the world because I quit drinking alcohol a couple of years ago and discovered Well-Being, and it really has been my salvation. I am fortunate to be joined by Jeff Stevens, who is the founder and CEO of Well-Being. Jeff, first of all, thank you so much for being a partner with The Loadout, and tell us about, this is such a unique non-alcoholic beer because it actually tastes like great beer.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that because that's the most important thing for us. We invested a lot of money into figuring out how to make great non-alcoholic craft beer, and that was something that I was really interested in. And to have someone like you say, you know what, I can drink this beer and do all the things that I would normally do and don't miss a thing, that makes it all, you know, so great for us.
And it is a craft beer. I mean, you know, I was from the time I was probably 14 or 15, I was a drinker until the time I was about 47.
Yeah.
And I have always been a beer guy, beer and bourbon. And I especially got into more flavorful beers over the past 10 years. But Well-Being, whether it's the Hellraiser Amber or the Well-Being, and you've actually got, or the IPA rather, and you've got a pretty nice group of growing products.
Yeah.
That are pretty impressive. But what's the secret to? I mean, you know, when you compare it to some of the other more watered down, imitators. What's the secret to making it so good?
Yeah, there's several ways you can make non-alcoholic beer, and we chose this way called vacuum distillation. So what it allows us to do, and this is the thing that comes through, is we fully ferment the beer. We make it just like you'd normally make alcohol beer. So it's ready to be alcohol beer, and then we take it, put it in a vacuum, lower the boiling point of the beer, and gently remove the alcohol. So what you're left with is all the mouthfeel and the flavor of beer without the alcohol. And I think that's where our products are distinct, is that mouthfeel, that aroma, that flavor that really comes through, versus you can stop the fermentation. That's another method. And those are a little more watery, I think, or just don't quite hold up as well, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being a partner. If you want to sample Wellbeing, you can go to wellbeingbrewing.com and use the code LOADOUT10 at checkout, and you will get a discount on Wellbeing from being a Loadout listener. Jeff, thank you so much for being a partner, and thank you so much for making this amazing product.
Aaron, my pleasure. Thank you for drinking it.
And we're back with the Reverend Peyton on the Loadout Music Podcast. So, your brother Jamie was originally your drummer, and then you were going to, in 2007, you were going to play a gig in Canada, and he got stuck at the border. And all I can find is it was a quote unquote youthful indiscretion, but he couldn't go in there, and ultimately that kind of led you to he dropped out of music, or at least playing with your band, and now Max Centini, I believe, is that how you pronounce the last name? Has become part of your band. Was that hard? You had grown up obviously with your brother playing music together. Was it difficult for you when he dropped from the band?
No, here's the reason why is because people don't realize how hard of a life this is, and what a scramble it is to your brain, and not everybody's cut out for it. My brother's someone that always had a ton of natural talent, and a ton of natural talent, but every other thing about this just wasn't his thing. The travel, even the shows, just you name it. He just wasn't cut out for it. He just didn't like it, and there were aspects of it that he would like, but it wasn't enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Breezy and I, we're lifers. We're just cut out for it. Like I was just 100% made for this. Built from the ground up to do this. And Max is now. I'd have to do some thinking about how many drummers in we are now. But Max has actually been with us now longer than any other drummer has been with us. Max has been with me for 8 years now.
Do you? Let me ask you this though. Do you think that? And I hear you. And being on the road for your entire life is not for everybody. Do you think it's easier for you because basically you and Breezy have a life partnership that spans well beyond music, and so you've got everything you need right there on the road?
I'm sure it makes it easier.
Yeah.
I think this pandemic has taught me, it's given me a little bit. I've learned that it definitely, it has been easier for me because Breezy's there. Yeah. And I think I probably should have, there's a speak of the devil, but I probably should have maybe over the years been more empathetic to different people that have been on the road with us. Yeah. Because I think it has been a lot easier for me.
Well, especially in the days where you weren't wearing deodorant and, you've got the pipes of justice hanging out and, you got to be very empathetic. But no, I mean, it's funny. My wife and I have had this conversation throughout because we always spent a lot of time together, but not as much as we have since during this pandemic. And she had said to me several times, you're with the right person if you're still happily married after this thing is done, because we've had to spend...
what's crazy is this pandemic, Breezy and I have not been together any more than we ever are.
Because you travel and you work together.
We have been nonstop together almost every waking second of our lives for 21 years.
So it's basically everyone else is kind of catching up with you and realizing.
Well, but it's not. I've never even thought about it.
Yeah.
I've never even thought twice about it. Like this, like people are like, oh, the pandemic, we're spending so much time. It's like, well, I mean, the only thing different is this pandemic was just us. There was nobody else around, so it was just us and our cat. And we got a cat at the beginning of the pandemic. So when this thing first started, we live way out in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and we don't have internet, or we didn't. They've actually got a grant, these rural community grants, grant fiber right past our house, so we're able to get really powerful. Here he is, right here. Here's my buddy. Come on, buddy. This Chunkleberry Finn. So we were able to get fiber ran right by the house, and this guy, he jumped in. We would before that, we would have to go to the library to use the internet. Is what I'm trying to say. So. Yeah. Which the library's closed, so we're just sitting out in the parking lot, loading emails on our phone. Like that was because our cell service is so bad, you can sometimes not even load an email at our house. So we'd be sitting out there like in the car, and this cat jumped in, like he would jump in the car with us, and while we were on the internet. So we found out he had been abandoned. So I'm like, he's coming home with us. So he's been here ever since, and This is crazy. I don't even know if it probably sound like an idiot saying this, but when we've gotten back to doing shows here a little bit, they're starting to trickle back some.
Yeah.
Leaving the cat behind is what's made me more empathetic of all these people that have been out there.
Too funny. So, 2008, you signed a deal with Side One Dummy Records in LA, and you released the whole Fam Damnly in 2008, and it entered the Billboard Blues charts at number 4. So I mean, that's it's blues is tough because we had Kenny Wayne Shepherd on a year ago on the podcast, and I mean, it's a tough genre because it's with how radio has collapsed, and it's just delivering your genre to the appropriate audience.
I got in trouble because in an interview, like these people took my words kind of out of context. Like I was saying that I said a while back that blues in America is in trouble and kind of on life support. I didn't mean there weren't good blues artists. Like that was what these people said I said. But what I meant was there is no blues section in most record stores anymore. There's very few blues radio stations. Like there's just not, like at one time it was a genre of music that was one of the most revered in this country. It's the genre from which everything else was birthed.
It is the found. I mean, you go listen to Led Zeppelin or the Stones, and I mean, even more modern music.
Even country music.
Yep.
Even country music in this country was so influenced by blues music that it would be unrecognizable otherwise.
At least the good country music, not the shitty stuff they play on radio stations. But
even that wouldn't exist.
In theory,
for better or for worse. So yeah. I mean that was what I was saying.
Yeah.
Is that the blues in general is just a there's more light jazz records sold in America than blues records.
Yep.
No, that's what I was saying, is that blues is literally one of the most least popular genres in terms of sales in the United States. And by saying that, I wasn't trying to put anybody down. I'm just saying that it's tough. It's tough to be a blues artist in this day and age. It really is. It's getting tougher all the time. That's all I was driving at.
So I hear you. We record this at Gaslight Studios in St. Louis, and St. Louis is home to the National Blues Museum and has a proud, rich history in blues. But you're absolutely right, man. I couldn't agree with you more. It's hard, and what's really kind of disturbing about the whole thing is, your first point. One, blues is the foundation of most all American music today, and two, some of the blues. I mean, many of the great blues guitarists are some of the greatest guitarists and musicians to ever step foot on this planet. It's a real disappointment that more people can't find appreciation in a genre that is so intertwined with, if you love music, it's somehow.
I have theories as to why this happened, and what happened. I won't I won't espouse them too much, but what I will say is this: is blues is also a wide genre. Like if I said to you, I like rock and roll music, you'd go, well, what does that mean? What kind of rock and roll? Like David Bowie?
Yeah.
Flash? Like, what do you mean? And blues is very similar, right? Like you can say, I love blues music. And I go, okay, well, does that mean B.B. King or Robert Johnson?
Chicago style blues. Are you talking about blues rock or,
Yeah. What do you mean? Do you mean, like you said, you mean Kenny Wayne Shepherd, or do you mean R.L. Burnside? These are almost like completely different genres.
Very different.
But they're all blues, Blues is a wide genre, just like rock and roll is, just like really country music is. I mean, we could, there's bro country on the radio. There's old school, stuff like Hank Sr., but Hank Sr. and Hank Jr. are sure a heck of a lot different from each other musically, right?
And now there's Hank the Fourth out there.
Country is also a wide genre.
Yeah.
And blues is the same. And a lot of times blues gets very much, when someone says, like I like, or I don't like blues music, they have a very narrow concept of what that is in their mind.
And I think also, to your point, it's important to note, and when I started listening to your music, what struck me is the remarkable sense of joy you get from listening to it, meaning that it seems like you and your band are having a great time. I mean, it just seems like you're at a party, you're having a good time. And I think typically the blues traditional blues can be thought of as more somber and melancholy, stories of despair. Whereas, again, it seems like there's such great joy when I listen to your music.
Well, I mean, R.L. Burnside said blues ain't nothing but dance music. And you go back to, like I say, let's go back to Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson was a, kind of depending on how you look, I look at Robert Johnson being a second generation blues man in terms of like the recorded generations of blues. Like before him, the earlier generation was Charlie Patton, Sunhouse. Let's go to Robert Johnson. Well, Robert Johnson was trying to play music for parties. Now, when they recorded him, the 29 songs that Robert Johnson recorded, they only let him record a couple of his more dancey numbers. And that was because by that time, record labels were already in there and said, hey, this is what's selling up north. We want you to play this kind of stuff. So, things like Hot Tamales and his Up Jump the Devil, he only got to record a couple of those kinds of songs because he was already told at that time, that kind of stuff isn't selling up north where we're selling these records. So we want you to play this other stuff. Well, if you go back to Charlie Patton, right? Charlie was playing whatever the heck he wanted because that was before there was any real record label filter. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why I love Charlie's music so much. It's been such an inspiration. It's just closer to the source of everything, where just there was, when Charlie Patton started playing, he was born on a plantation in the heart of the Mississippi Delta with no road going to it. All right, completely isolated. You had to walk out on foot or go across the country on a horse or a mule. So it's a different thing. Charlie Patton was the last generation of musician in this country that didn't learn from the records. Even Robert Johnson learned from records. That's something that most people don't know. He had a collection of 78s, and of his recorded songs, I can just about go through and tell you each one of his songs, what he was listening to when he wrote that song. Which Skip James song, which Charlie Patton song, which Leroy Carr song or Scrapper Blackwell song he was listening to when he come up with that concept. Now, he took it to a different place and had his own style. I'm not knocking Robert Johnson. I'm just saying that at that point, music had already changed, right? I mean, Robert Johnson learned the same way I did from the records, and that's something that people don't. The timeline of stuff is sometimes messed up. Howlin' Wolf was older than Robert Johnson by a year. Like that usually blows people's mind. They're like, well, wait a minute, Howlin' Wolf was big in the '60s, same age, but only 1 year older. Like the timeline of this stuff in our minds is kind of messed up because of mythology and this concept that there's like this mythical blues man on some front porch somewhere. It's made some deal with the devil. But really, what those guys were trying to do was make music that inspired them, that also got people moving at a party. You know, on those plantations, man, you were required to work 6.5 days a week. You only had 1/2 day off. So Saturday night was the one night where you got to maybe let loose a little bit. Well, people were drinking homemade moonshine and dancing and getting together. It wasn't like people sitting around, you know, like on some front porch kind of, I don't know, crying or something. You know what I mean? Like it was party time, right? So I've been able to talk to people that were there firsthand, people like David Honeyboy Edwards. And, you know, he said the same thing to me, that it was a party. People on Saturday night really needed to let loose because it was all they had. That was it. And it was back to work. So it's you know, some of this stuff, the mythology of it bothers me. Like I always kind of was bothered by the entire Robert Johnson, you know, selling soul to devil myth anyway. Robert Johnson never claimed that. It was Tommy Johnson that actually made those claims. Robert Johnson, the only person that really started that was, you know, Sunhouse kind of said that because, you know, Robert Johnson was younger than Sunhouse by a couple of decades. And when Robert Johnson was coming up and he was young, they didn't think he was very good, so they wouldn't, you know, let him hang out. Robert Johnson went away and he came back and he was good. Well, what he did was he went away and he practiced and he got a hold of 78 records. And he hooked up with, and this is David Honeyboy Edwards told me firsthand, he hooked up with women that had phonograph machines. He was always seeking out women that had a little bit more money, that had the record players, because he couldn't afford a record player and he was an itinerant blues man. So he definitely couldn't travel with one, but he could travel with a few 78s, and he did. So, which thinking about, you know, Robert Johnson in the Mississippi Delta carrying a guitar and a collection of 78s around is incredible to me, right? So he's got these 78s and he's listening to this and he pours over them, and then he comes back and he's good. Well, Sunhouse didn't understand that because, you know, Sunhouse didn't practice, and, you know, it was you know, Sunhouse had a lot of demons inside him. I think he thought everybody did. Robert Johnson didn't have demons inside him. Robert Johnson was a absolute student of music, a lover of music, and he poured his soul into practicing music and trying to become a professional musician. Because at that time, the only way to escape plantation life was to become a professional musician. That was it. And that concept was created by Charlie Patton. He was the first one. Before him, there was no such thing. You know, there were a few people maybe that got into, like, you know, some kind of like, you know, minstrel show or something in on the coasts, but in the Delta, to travel around and be a famous musician. Like, think about this: Charlie Patton, he's traveling around in the 10s and 20s, and he has a like, this is before he recorded. He's already famous before he recorded, just by word of mouth, people coming out. And he would show up at the train station nearby, and he'd play that week at the train station and say, "Hey, we're going to be on this plantation on Saturday night having a juke house party." And then they would, this is Honeyboy Edwards told me this, and I love this. They had these mirrors that they would put out with lanterns, okay? And the mirrors would shine the light up at the sky. And a lot of people don't know this, but the Mississippi Delta is one of the flattest places on planet Earth. It's so flat. In fact, it's only comparable like the Salt Flats, and there's like one other place that's this flat. It's one of the flattest places on planet Earth. So they around this one, you know, shotgun shack house that was made to juke that night, they'd shine lanterns out at mirrors, and the mirrors would shine the light up in the sky, and you could see it for miles. And then people from miles around would know that's where Charlie Patton was playing that night, and they would all come. And then he would have to entertain a group of dancing people, completely acoustic, because there was no such thing as amplified sound at that time. And by the time he recorded, the first record was made in 1929, he was already a star. And by some accounts, at one point had his own car. He definitely played a Gibson in a hard case when everyone else was carrying around Kalamazoos and sax. Like, that alone is incredible. Now, you know, a guy shows up with a Gibson in a hard case and no one bats an eye. Back then, you show up with a Gibson in a hard case, it was like, whoa, who's this? You know? So Robert Johnson recorded. By the time Robert Johnson recorded it, Charlie Patton had already died. He'd already lived, had become a legend, recorded, and died before Robert Johnson ever recorded a note.
We are talking to the Reverend Peyton of the Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band. We're going to take one more short break and be right back. And now a quick word from one of our sponsors. Have you ever wanted a tightly wrapped American flag around your waist with a giant bald eagle face placed squarely on your junk? Or how about a Steve Harvey coronavirus mask? Or maybe the next evolution of jorts in the form of a hot and sexy denim Speedo? But maybe, just maybe, you're dying for a pair of Kansas City Chiefs overalls or even leopard pants. Yes, 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 and most definitely yes. And it's all pretty easily found at Shinesty, the perfectly weird party gear website that I find myself escaping to every time I need a mental break from the miserable 2020 we've been having. So check out our new sponsor at shinesty.com. That's the word shine, STY.com, and use the code LOADOUT15, that's LOADOUT15 at checkout. Now back to this less than spectacular show. And we are back on the Loadout Music Podcast with the Reverend Peyton. So, before we were really talking about the history of blues, and because, where it led us into there was that the success you've had on the blues charts, including the record you put out, the Front Porch Sessions in 2017, that was on the 30 Tigers label. It debuted at number 1 on iTunes Blues chart and number 2 on Billboard. When you see and experience that kind of success, considering all the work that goes into creating art and creating music, finding an audience, and just, you were talking before about your insecurities that you had to overcome. That has to be, to me, remarkably rewarding to say somebody really, there's a group of people that really like what I'm doing.
Yeah, man. It's twofold. There's that. There is a, every now and then when you have like little successes in music, it's kind of like I think I have a little bit of a gambler's heart, right? So it's like, a gambler can lose 20 times, but only remembers the time they won, and I think there's part of me is that I have this gambler's heart. So I'm willing to put up with a ton of losses just to chase that win, but also I think there's like this part of me that can't be satisfied in any way and is in a constant quest to like just better myself and best myself. And, it's like, oh man, well, that was pretty good, but I can do better. I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done that. And that drives me to make a better record. And I think over the course of our career, if you listen, even the most unobjective, ears would say, man, this band's records have really gotten better over time.
Yeah.
And partially because, like I said, when we started, we were teenagers, and we've now have been able to have, we grew up doing this, and we were lucky enough to be able to be there and play with, guys like T Model Ford and Robert Belfour and Honey Boy Edwards and have firsthand accounts from them. And, but I think one of the real things that drives me is that like, I can't be satisfied. Like that kind of stuff. Like I go, oh man, like this last record, we were number 1 on the Billboard Blues charts with this new record for, a couple of weeks. And we made it to number 1 on our song Ways and Means on Sirius XM Bluesville was number 1 on their blues countdown for almost a month. And it's still like in the top 5, but I'm the kind of person, man, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm like, man, it should have been a whole month of number 1, not just 2.
You want more. Like in a good way, in a driven way.
We like, well, man, it's cool that Sirius is playing it and we got number 1 for a month, but man, I wish it'd been 2 months, like that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they're annoyed by it. They're like, God, man, but it's, I can't explain that other than I just have this, I just always feel like, one, I believe that we can do better and be better. And I believe that like my best record hasn't been made, you know, and I believe that, you know, that there's more we like, regardless of how many great fans we have out there, I'm always looking for one more.
So we talked a little bit about COVID before. Things are opening up. You know, live music is beginning again. I know my band has played, you know, 2 shows in the last 2 weeks, and it's just been really wonderful to get in front of people. You guys play like 250 shows a year when we're not in COVID times. So what's the plan? I mean, I imagine you've got somebody booking a ridiculous number of shows, and at some point you're going to head out and not be back in Indiana anytime soon.
Yeah, you know, man, and it's good to hear that you're playing. I every time I hear, you know, musicians say they're back to doing some stuff, it makes me feel good. We've had some stuff trickle back, and what I've been telling people is it's not going to be a light switch. It's a faucet that someone's slowly turning on. And it's going a little slower than I thought it might be at where we're at now. I really thought we'd be further along, but that's okay. We've been surviving, man. And that's, at this point, like that's almost good enough. Like for me, it's been tough. Like at the beginning of this pandemic, we had such a terrible time. Breezy was sick. She wouldn't get well. We had everything crash around us. We're in this cabin in the woods. The world is collapsing, and we don't even have internet to see what is going on. Right. So the first month of being shut down was the hardest month of my life. And I about come unglued. It was just a horrendous bad deal. In that time, I wrote almost all the songs for our record, Dance Songs for Hard Times. This our recent release. And I told Breezy, I said, if we stop making music, if we completely stop making music, then we are no longer a band. So we have to figure out what to do. So we got set up to do our live streams. We put together our Patreon, but behind the scenes, we were working on music videos and our new album. And we were doing everything we could to keep making music and to stay a band. And that's just what I'm going to do, man. I'm going to be like water, and I'm just going to be as flexible as I possibly can be. And as the shows come back, you know, we're going to be booking them. And it's, you know, we have high hopes that the fall is going to be really big.
Yeah, I think come fall, you're going to see, I mean, you're already starting to see it. Like the big shows you're seeing those. I think the small shows
coming back means that the little shows are definitely back.
Right behind it. You're right behind it. Yeah. No doubt about it. I do think by the fall, it's going to be back to normal in these clubs unless something happens where you start to see.
The thing that worries me is there's going to be probably a lot of the same number of bands competing for 20% less venues.
No doubt.
So it's going to make competition tough. So I think that we're probably going to not have the same number of shows that we normally would have to survive. It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
It's still going to probably require us to do our live streams and to keep hustling on our Patreon and everything else to stay afloat for a long time. I was talking with someone, they're like, those venues will come back. I'm like, well, if you've invested your whole life into a music venue and you bought the PA system and you spent, 5-6 figures building out a room you bought, and you've got your liquor license, all that stuff, and then you lose it all to the bank. Like, that don't come back. Like, you don't just come and take your whole life's work and like be like, well, shows are back, so I'll just go put that back together. That doesn't come back.
It's not
now,
that
eventually,
easy.
maybe someone will fill that void if there's enough, people wanting to buy tickets, and maybe it'll be most likely it's going to be something like Live Nation or someone comes in and buys it. But it's not going to be an instant thing. It's like that faucet, man, slowly turning on, and. Me, I'm ready for that light switch to be flipped, but I know that's just not how it's going to go.
Yeah.
So I've had to kind of resign myself that that's not the way it is. And, for musicians, like we've been it's like we've been like chasing a carrot on a stick. You remember like in March 2020, it's like, oh man, there might be some shows in the end of summer. Oh no, there'll be some shows there in the end of fall. Oh no, maybe the winter. Nope. Like it just kept being pushed back, and until finally the agents and the managers and the venues just stopped booking anything. Like it was just like, instead of being rescheduled, everything was just canceled, and Live Nation laid everybody off, and all these other places just shuttered the doors, and it was done.
Yeah.
And that's not something that you can easily just be like, okay, man, we're going to do this now. There's still a lot of the strangest, like we've been doing a few shows, and I can tell people are like, they almost feel like they're doing a bad thing by coming out. It's like they feel like they're doing something wrong. You know what I mean? Like going to a show.
It feels strange. It feels,
man, it's like hiding a porn mag under your bed or something. You know what I mean?
That's a good thing. But I mean, this is.
That's what I feel like when I see these people out there. They're like, oh man, should I be here? Am I doing a bad thing? This feels good, but it also doesn't feel right.
I'll tell you what, I'm just glad that you were the first person to bring up porn on this conversation, because I really wanted to go there, and we were talking about your hand surgery. So one of us had to do it. All right, Reverend Peyton, man, it has been fantastic having you on the Loadout. You can find the Reverend Peyton Damn Band on Big Damn Band on all the streaming services, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube. Really enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you so much for being on the Loadout Music Podcast, presented by Shinesty and Wellbeing Brewing, and broadcast from Gaslight Studios as always. Thanks, dude. It was fun, man. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks so much, man. This is great. I sure appreciate it. Let's do it again sometime.
Right on. Hey, folks, if you made it this far, and judging by our numbers, you haven't, thanks for listening to the Loadout Music Podcast. You can always find us at loadoutmusic.com and wherever you like to get your podcasts, like iTunes or SoundCloud. And of course, as always, thanks to Gaslight Studios for hosting us. Have a good one.